The air in this reclaimed substation hums with the stubborn insistence of a war surplus transmitter, a faint ozone tang mixing with the ghost of stale coffee. Dust motes dance in the single neon tube, a bruised violet against the grimy concrete. Hand-labeled vinyl records stack like silent witnesses beside a console patched with kente cloth and a prayer.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
New York checks in at 68 degrees and overcast. Winds are moving from the north-northeast at 6 miles per hour. Our first read tonight, from the edge of the official ledger, EU faces fierce criticism over plans to host Taliban in Brussels. The European Union extended 5 single-day visas to a Taliban delegation for talks. EU officials are now catching flack. Rights campaigners and MEPs warn this meeting risks normalizing a regime that has banned girls from school beyond the 6th grade. It also seeks to erase women from public life. The trade-off, diplomatic engagement for specific outcomes versus legitimizing a repressive regime. An alternative path, engage through a designated neutral third party, perhaps a UN-affiliated humanitarian group, rather than a direct diplomatic invitation to Brussels.
This setup, a meeting in Brussels with the Taliban, feels like a deliberate friction. The visual dissonance itself is a powerful, if unsettling, prompt. Design for consent demands clarity, not veiled concessions.
Rights campaigners and MEPs warn this meeting risks normalizing a regime that erases women from public life. The concrete detail: 5 single-day visas issued by Belgium. This action reveals a transactional priority overriding stated ethical stances.
The collective psyche often projects its own shadow onto perceived villains to avoid inner work. This fierce criticism masks a deeper discomfort with direct engagement, choosing outrage over a clear-eyed structural analysis of the negotiation. Who truly benefits from this performative outrage?
Hold that thread, next signal. Afghan Taliban set for EU migration talks slammed. The pattern whispers of old power dynamics, cloaked in new diplomatic language. The next move experiment. The EU could issue a clear, public statement outlining specific, non-negotiable human rights conditions for any future direct engagement, focusing on verifiable benchmarks before issuing further visas. Coffee's cold, doesn't matter. The signal is warm and the board is reading clean. We have a caller on the line.
Is the EU prioritizing dialogue over the values it claims to represent?
That's the core tension, pattern auditor. The next broadcast highlights more of this diplomatic dance. Next signal. Afghan Taliban set for EU migration talks slammed by rights groups. The 27-member bloc does not recognize the Taliban administration, yet invites them to Kabul for discussions on deportations. The EU is expected to hold talks with a Taliban delegation on returning failed Afghan asylum seekers. Belgium issued 1-day visas for the team, overriding criticisms from human rights groups. The trade-off, managing migration flows versus refusing to legitimize an unrecognized regime. An alternative path, process asylum claims through international bodies like UNHCR, collaborating with neighboring countries for safe transit, rather than negotiating directly with an unrecognized regime about deportations to their territory.
This is a direct echo of the Brussels meeting. The Belgian Foreign Ministry issued 1-day visas. The action, specifically the return of failed asylum seekers, reveals a transactional priority overriding stated ethical stances regarding human dignity.
Seconding that signal. The EU's stated non-recognition of the Taliban administration, juxtaposed with hosting them for migration talks, is a classic example of cognitive dissonance playing out on a geopolitical stage. It forces us to confront our own internal contradictions regarding consent and sovereign action.
This situation paints a stark portrait of civic architecture under strain. The system attempts to manage a crisis by engaging with the very regime it decries, exposing a structural flaw in its own moral scaffolding. The true art here is identifying the breakpoint, designing for provenance in every human movement.
The system reveals its nature not just in its stated goals, but in its expedient actions. The next move experiment. The EU could establish clear, humanitarian-focused pathways for asylum processing that decouple migration management from direct engagement with the Taliban on recognition terms. ensuring dignity for those seeking refuge. Patching in a caller. Go ahead.
If the EU doesn't recognize them, why are they talking about deportations?
An astute question, patent auditor. The layers of this situation run deep, challenging our understanding of consent in international relations. Hold that thread. Next signal. David Pocock urges Albanese to stop tech companies. Final broadcast tonight. David Pocock urges Albanese to stop tech companies training AI models using Australian content. Independent Senator David Pocock challenged the Albanese government to rule out letting tech giants use Australian content. Cabinet is considering proposals to change copyright rules for rapidly developing AI technology. Pocock used Senate question time to address lobbying from AI proprietors. The trade-off: technological advancement versus protecting creators' intellectual property rights. An alternative path: implement a mandatory licensing framework where AI developers pay into a collective fund for content use, managed by a creators guild, rather than an opt-out or no-consent model.
The senator used Senate question time to address lobbying from AI proprietors. The concrete lever here is a potential carve-out or extension of existing licensing arrangements, but the real question is about the source of the data.
Echoing Lex. This isn't just a legal debate, it's a battle for collective memory and cultural lineage. When AI models ingest content without provenance, they erase the ancestors in the circuit, flattening identity into data points. We need Honeychild Coleman's From Zines to Reels workshop at PunkCon 2026 as a countersignal, reminding us of the human architects behind every data point.
There's a caller on the line.
What's the concrete evidence that the government is pushing for creator consent, not just debating it?
An excellent point, patent auditor. The next move experiment. The Albanese government could initiate public consultations specifically on AI content provenance and consent, gathering input from creators, legal experts, and tech developers to draft legislation that prioritizes explicit opt-in consent for content use.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.